On July 15, 1993, the Henderson family left their home in Denver, Colorado, for what was supposed to be a 2-week road trip to explore the scenic routes of the American Southwest. David Henderson, a 42-year-old geology professor at the University of Colorado, had meticulously planned this journey as a way to combine his love of rock formations with quality family time during summer break. Sarah Henderson, 38, a librarian with an adventurous spirit, had been excited about the trip for months. She had spent countless evenings poring over travel guides and maps, marking potential stops and hidden gems along their planned route. Their 2 children, 16-year-old Michael and 14-year-old Emma, represented the typical mix of teenage enthusiasm and reluctance that came with family vacations. The family had loaded their 1989 Ford Bronco with camping gear, geological equipment for David's research, and enough supplies for 2 weeks on the road. The vehicle, a reliable workhorse that David had purchased specifically for such adventures, was painted forest green and bore Colorado license plates reading Geo-Dad, a playful nod to David's profession that had become something of a family joke. Their planned itinerary was ambitious but achievable. From Denver, they would drive south through New Mexico, exploring the Carlsbad Caverns and White Sands National Monument, then west into Arizona to visit the Grand Canyon and Sedona, before making a northern loop through Utah's national parks and returning home through Colorado's mountain towns. It was the kind of classic American road trip that creates lifelong memories. The last confirmed sighting of the Henderson family occurred at a gas station in Gallup, New Mexico, at approximately 3:47 p.m. on July 17, 1993. Security camera footage, grainy by today's standards but revolutionary for its time, showed David filling up the Bronco while Sarah went inside to pay and purchase snacks. Michael and Emma could be seen stretching their legs near the vehicle, typical teenage road trip behavior after hours of driving. The gas station attendant, Miguel Ramirez, would later tell investigators that the family seemed perfectly normal during their stop. David had asked for directions to a scenic overlook that wasn't on their main route, something about interesting geological formations that a colleague had mentioned. Miguel had drawn a rough map on a napkin, directing them to take Highway 602 north for about 30 miles, then turn west on an unmarked dirt road. The professor seemed really excited about these rocks. Miguel would recall 30 years later, his memory still crystal clear about that afternoon. He kept talking about how this formation wasn't in any of the guidebooks, how it might be something special. The wife looked a little tired, but she was smiling. The kids were typical teenagers, you know. The boy was reading some comic book, and the girl had headphones on. And after leaving the gas station, the Henderson family was expected to reach the scenic overlook by late afternoon, spend the night camping under the stars, something David had been particularly excited about due to the area's minimal light pollution, and then continue their journey toward Arizona the following morning. But they never reached their next planned destination. When the Hendersons failed to check into their reserved campsite at Canyon de Chelly National Monument in Arizona on July 19th, the park rangers initially assumed they had simply changed their plans. Road trips, after all, were inherently flexible, and many families altered their itineraries based on weather, interest, or simple spontaneity. It wasn't until July 22nd, when David failed to appear for a pre-arranged phone call with his research colleague Dr. Robert Martinez at the University of New Mexico, that real concern began to emerge. David had been planning to discuss some geological samples he hoped to collect during the trip, and missing this call was completely out of character for the methodical professor. Sarah's sister, Linda Morrison, was the first family member to raise the alarm. Sarah had promised to call every few days during the trip, and 5 days of silence was unprecedented for someone who usually checked in religiously. Linda contacted the Colorado State Police on July 23rd, officially reporting the family as missing. The initial search efforts were hampered by the vast and remote nature of the American Southwest. The Henderson family could have been anywhere within a several hundred-mile radius, and their planned route took them through some of the most isolated terrain in the continental United States. Desert landscapes, canyon country, and mountain wilderness areas presented countless possibilities for where they might have encountered trouble. Detective Sarah Chen of the Colorado State Police was assigned as the lead investigator. A 15-year veteran with experience in missing persons cases, Chen immediately recognized the challenges ahead. Unlike missing persons cases in urban areas, where witnesses and surveillance cameras provided leads, a family lost in the Southwest's wilderness was like searching for a needle in 1,000 haystacks. The search began with a systematic approach. Chen and her team contacted every hotel, motel, campground, and gas station along the Henderson family's planned route. They distributed flyers with photographs of the family and their distinctive green Bronco. Local and state police agencies across New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado were alerted to watch for the vehicle. The first significant lead came from a truck driver named Harold Big Pete Peterson, who contacted police on July 25th. Peterson claimed he had seen a green Ford Bronco with Colorado plates pulled over on the side of Highway 602 north of Gallup on the evening of July 17th. The timing and location matched perfectly with where the Henderson family would have been heading after receiving directions from Miguel Ramirez. "I remember thinking about stopping to help," Peterson told investigators. "But there was another vehicle already there. Looked like someone was already giving them assistance. Dark-colored pickup truck, maybe blue or black. Figured everything was under control, so I kept driving." This sighting led to the first organized ground search in the area northwest of Gallup. On July 27th, search and rescue teams from multiple agencies converged on the remote desert landscape where Peterson claimed to have seen the Bronco. The terrain was challenging, a mixture of high desert, arroyos, mesas, and hidden canyons that could easily conceal a vehicle. For 3 days, teams searched an ever-widening grid pattern around Highway 602. They found tire tracks that might have belonged to the Bronco, but the sandy soil and frequent winds made definitive identification impossible. They discovered several abandoned campsites, but none showed signs of recent use by the Henderson family. The search was complicated by the area's geography. What appeared to be simple desert from a distance revealed itself to be a complex maze of small canyons, hidden washes, and geological formations that could easily disorient even experienced outdoors enthusiasts. David Henderson's expertise in geology might have actually led the family deeper into this labyrinth in pursuit of interesting rock formations. As days turned into weeks, the official search area expanded to cover nearly 500 square miles of some of the most remote terrain in New Mexico. Helicopter overflights scanned for any sign of the green Bronco, but the vastness of the landscape and the vehicle's earth-tone color made aerial detection extremely difficult. The case attracted significant media attention throughout the summer of 1993. The Henderson family represented every American family's road trip dreams, and their disappearance tapped into primal fears about the dangers lurking in the country's vast wilderness areas. Television news programs ran segments about the missing family, and newspapers across the region carried their story. David's colleagues at the University of Colorado organized volunteer search parties, bringing their geological expertise to help identify areas where David might have been attracted to explore. Sarah's library colleagues distributed missing person flyers throughout the region's small towns. The children's school friends held vigils and fundraisers to support the search efforts. As summer turned to fall, the focus of the investigation began to shift. With no physical evidence of what had happened to the Henderson family, investigators had to consider all possibilities. Had they simply gotten lost and died of exposure in the harsh desert environment? Had they encountered mechanical problems in a remote area where help couldn't reach them? Or had something more sinister occurred? The investigation revealed that David Henderson had been carrying approximately $3,000 in cash for the trip, a substantial amount that could have made the family targets for robbery. Credit card records showed no activity after their gas station stop in Gallup, supporting the theory that something had happened soon after they left the station. Detective Chen interviewed dozens of people who had been in the area during the relevant time period. She spoke with other tourists, local residents, Native American tribal members, and anyone else who might have seen something unusual. The vast majority of these interviews yielded nothing useful, but they did paint a picture of how isolated and dangerous the terrain could be. One particularly unsettling interview was with a local rancher named Tom Begay, whose property bordered some of the search area. Begay told Chen that there were places in the desert that even experienced locals avoided, areas with confusing geology that seemed to disorient visitors, places where the terrain played tricks on your sense of direction. "There are spots out there," Begay said, his weathered face serious, "where the rock formations create natural mazes. Easy to get in, hard to get out. We've lost cattle in some of those areas. Sometimes we find the bones years later in places that don't make sense, like the animals walked in circles until they died." As 1993 drew to a close, the active search for the Henderson family was officially suspended. The case remained open, and any new evidence would be investigated, but the reality was that 4 people and their vehicle had simply vanished into the American Southwest, as if they had never existed. The family's disappearance became one of the region's most enduring mysteries. Over the years, there were occasional reported sightings, always false leads that led nowhere. Conspiracy theories emerged, ranging from alien abduction to secret government activities in the area. But for 3 decades, the desert kept its secrets. David's parents, both in their 70s when their son disappeared, never stopped hoping for answers. They hired private investigators, posted rewards, and kept the story alive in local media. Sarah's sister Linda became a vocal advocate for missing persons cases, working with organizations to improve search protocols and family support systems. Michael and Emma Henderson would have been in their 40s by 2023, possibly with families of their own. Their high school class dedicated their 1995 graduation to their missing classmates, and Emma's best friend, Jessica Walsh, never forgot the dreams they had shared about their futures. The case file grew thick with reports, photographs, maps, and witness statements, but the central mystery remained unsolved. Where had the Henderson family gone after leaving that gas station in Gallup? What had drawn them off their planned route into the trackless desert? And why had one of the most intensive searches in New Mexico's history failed to find even the smallest trace of their passage? For 30 years, these questions haunted everyone who had been involved in the search. Detective Chen, now retired, still kept copies of the case files in her home office. The gas station attendant Miguel Ramirez would sometimes pause while serving customers, wondering if he had somehow contributed to the family's fate by giving them those directions. The desert landscape remained largely unchanged over the decades. Highway 602 was eventually repaved and slightly rerouted, but the vast wilderness areas looked much the same as they had in 1993. Occasional hikers and off-road enthusiasts explored the region, but the most remote areas remained as isolated and forbidding as ever. Climate change and periodic droughts had altered some of the terrain's details, exposing rock formations that had been hidden for decades and filling in others that had once been prominent landmarks. Flash floods had carved new arroyos and filled in old ones, creating an ever-changing landscape that bore little resemblance to the maps from 1993. As technology advanced, some investigators hoped that satellite imagery and GPS mapping might reveal clues that had been missed during the original search. But the area was so vast and the potential hiding spots so numerous that even modern technology couldn't overcome the fundamental challenge of finding a needle in a haystack. The Henderson family's disappearance became a cautionary tale told around campfires and in online forums dedicated to missing persons cases. Their story joined the ranks of other unsolved mysteries of the American West, families and individuals who had ventured into the wilderness and simply vanished without a trace. But the desert, as it turns out, doesn't always keep its secrets forever. Sometimes, after decades of silence, the land reveals what it has been hiding. Sometimes the impossible becomes possible, and the lost can be found in places that defy explanation. In the summer of 2023, exactly 30 years after the Henderson family's disappearance, a discovery would be made that would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about the case. A discovery that would raise more questions than it answered, and reveal that some mysteries are far stranger than anyone could have imagined. The truth about what happened to the Henderson family was about to emerge from a place that shouldn't exist, in a location that appears on no map, in circumstances that would force everyone involved to reconsider their understanding of what was possible in the vast American wilderness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been studying atmospheric anomalies in the American Southwest for over a decade when she noticed something that would change everything. As a meteorologist and atmospheric physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory, Rodriguez specialized in investigating unusual weather patterns and electromagnetic disturbances that couldn't be explained by conventional science. On the morning of July 17, 2023, exactly 30 years to the day after the Henderson family's disappearance, Rodriguez was analyzing satellite data from a routine atmospheric survey when she noticed an irregularity in the electromagnetic readings from a remote area approximately 40 miles northwest of Gallup, New Mexico. The anomaly wasn't dramatic, just a subtle distortion in the electromagnetic field that appeared and disappeared in a pattern that defied natural explanation. What made it particularly intriguing was its location. According to all official maps, topographical surveys, and GPS databases, the coordinates showing the anomaly corresponded to empty desert. No geological features, no human structures, nothing that should generate electromagnetic interference. Rodriguez had encountered similar anomalies before, usually caused by underground mineral deposits, military equipment, or atmospheric conditions. But this one was different. The electromagnetic signature suggested the presence of metal objects in an area that geological surveys indicated should contain only sandstone and clay. Intrigued by the scientific puzzle, Rodriguez decided to investigate personally. She assembled a small research team consisting of herself, her graduate assistant Marcus Thompson, and Dr. James Wu, a geologist from the University of New Mexico who specialized in desert terrain. Their plan was simple: use GPS coordinates to locate the source of the electromagnetic anomaly and determine what was causing the unusual readings. On July 20th, 2023, the research team departed from Albuquerque in 2 vehicles. Rodriguez's modified Toyota 4Runner, equipped with scientific instruments, and Wu's pickup truck carrying camping gear for what they expected to be a 2-day expedition. They had obtained the necessary permits for scientific research on federal land and had notified the appropriate authorities of their plans. The journey to the coordinates took them along increasingly remote roads. They followed Interstate 40 west to Gallup, then took Highway 602 north into the high desert country. After about 30 miles, they turned west onto a dirt road that appeared on some maps but not others, the same route that Miguel Ramirez had directed the Henderson family to take 30 years earlier. The terrain grew progressively more challenging as they drove deeper into the wilderness. What had started as a well-maintained dirt road gradually deteriorated into a barely visible track that wound between massive sandstone formations and across dry creek beds. Both drivers had extensive experience with off-road travel, but even they found the route difficult to follow. After 3 hours of slow progress, Rodriguez's GPS indicated they were approaching the coordinates of the electromagnetic anomaly. But as they crested a small rise, they encountered something that stopped them in their tracks. The landscape ahead of them didn't match any of their maps. According to their topographical charts, they should have been looking at a gradual slope descending into a wide valley. Instead, they faced a narrow canyon that plunged dramatically into the earth, its walls carved from red and yellow sandstone that glowed in the afternoon sunlight. The canyon was perhaps a quarter-mile wide and appeared to extend for several miles into the distance. "This doesn't make sense," Wu said, comparing their GPS location to his collection of geological surveys. "This canyon isn't on any map I've ever seen, and I've been studying this region for 20 years. Thompson, who was operating the electromagnetic detection equipment, confirmed that the anomaly was definitely originating from somewhere within the mysterious canyon. The readings were stronger here than they had been from satellite observations, suggesting multiple metallic objects of significant size. The research team faced a decision. They could return to civilization, report their findings, and wait for a larger expedition with more resources. Or they could investigate immediately while they had the opportunity and the equipment to document their discovery. Rodriguez chose to investigate. As a scientist, she was driven by curiosity and the knowledge that this discovery could be significant. The canyon's absence from official maps suggested it might be a previously unknown geological formation, which would be a remarkable find in an area that had been extensively surveyed for over a century. The descent into the canyon required careful navigation. The research team found what appeared to be an ancient animal trail that switched back down the eastern wall, providing just enough width for their vehicles. The trail showed signs of occasional use, tire tracks that were old but not ancient, suggesting that other people had discovered this hidden canyon over the years. As they descended, the canyon walls rose higher around them, creating a sense of being in a hidden world, separate from the desert above. The rock formations were unlike anything Wu had seen in the region, twisted and carved by forces that seemed inconsistent with the area's known geological history. The electromagnetic readings grew stronger with each 100 feet of descent. Thompson's equipment indicated they were approaching something metallic and substantial, but the canyon's winding nature prevented them from seeing far ahead. It was Rodriguez who first spotted the reflection of sunlight off metal about a mile into the canyon. At first, it looked like a piece of aluminum or steel discarded by previous visitors. But as they drove closer, the object resolved into something far more significant and disturbing. Sitting in a small clearing surrounded by desert vegetation, as if it had been carefully parked there decades ago, was a 1989 Ford Bronco with Colorado license plates. The research team stopped their vehicles 50 yards away, stunned by the impossibility of what they were seeing. The Bronco appeared to be in remarkably good condition for a vehicle that had been sitting in the desert for 30 years. While there was obvious weathering and some rust, the overall structure was intact, the tires still held air, and the paint was still recognizable as the forest green that witnesses had described. Thompson was the first to approach the vehicle. "The license plate," he called back to the others, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "It reads, Geo Dad. The implications hit Rodriguez immediately. She had heard of the Henderson family disappearance. It was one of the most famous missing persons cases in the Southwest, frequently mentioned in news articles about unsolved mysteries. But according to every account she had ever read, the family had vanished without a trace on flat desert terrain near a highway. They had never been reported as entering any canyon, much less one that didn't appear on any official map. Wu approached the Bronco from the passenger side, his geological training making him automatically observe and document everything he saw. The vehicle's positioning was unusual. It wasn't abandoned haphazardly, as one might expect from a family in distress. Instead, it was parked neatly in the clearing, as if someone had carefully chosen the spot. "The doors are closed," Wu reported. "Windows are intact. No obvious signs of crash damage or mechanical failure." Rodriguez began documenting the scene with her camera, while Thompson took electromagnetic readings around the vehicle. The readings were consistent with a large metallic object that had been stationary for an extended period, but there were no other significant electromagnetic sources in the immediate area. When they finally approached close enough to look through the windows, what they saw inside the Bronco raised even more questions. The interior was dusty and weathered, but largely intact. Camping gear was still neatly packed in the rear compartment. Maps and travel guides lay on the dashboard, open to pages describing geological formations in the region. On the front seat, they could see David Henderson's geological notebook, its pages yellowed with age but still legible. The last entry, dated July 17, 1993, described his excitement about exploring unusual rock formations that demonstrate unique stratification patterns inconsistent with regional geological history. Most disturbing of all, there was no sign of the Henderson family themselves. No belongings scattered around the vehicle, no indication of where they might have gone after parking in this impossible location. Thompson discovered tracks leading away from the Bronco deeper into the canyon. The prints were old and partially obscured by decades of wind and occasional rain, but they appeared to show two adults and two younger people walking together in the direction the canyon extended. "They walked deeper into the canyon," Thompson reported, "but these footprints are 30 years old. Where could they have been going?" Rodriguez began documenting everything with scientific precision. She photographed the vehicle from every angle, recorded GPS coordinates, and made detailed notes about the canyon's characteristics. The more she observed, the more convinced she became that this discovery would require immediate attention from law enforcement and possibly federal authorities. The canyon itself presented as many mysteries as the vehicle it contained. The rock formations were unlike anything in the standard geological surveys of the region. The stratification patterns that David Henderson had noted in his journal were indeed unusual. Layers of rock that seemed to have formed under conditions that shouldn't have existed in this part of New Mexico. More puzzling still was the canyon's complete absence from official maps, even allowing for changes in terrain over 30 years. A formation this substantial shouldn't have been missed by decades of aerial surveys, satellite imaging, and geological mapping projects. Wu spent hours examining the canyon walls, trying to understand how such a formation could have been overlooked. His conclusion was unsettling. Based on the rock layers and erosion patterns, the canyon appeared to be ancient, probably formed over millions of years. It wasn't a recent geological event that might have been missed by earlier surveys. As evening approached, the research team faced another decision. They could spend the night in the canyon, continuing their investigation, or return to civilization to report their discovery to the appropriate authorities. The scientific value of their find was enormous, but the implications for the Henderson family case meant that law enforcement needed to be involved immediately. Rodriguez chose to document as much as possible before leaving. Using portable floodlights, the team continued their investigation into the evening hours. They discovered more troubling evidence, additional tire tracks from other vehicles that had visited the canyon over the years, suggesting that the Henderson family's Bronco was not the only vehicle to have found its way to this impossible location. Some of the tire tracks appeared relatively recent, possibly within the last few years. Others showed signs of age that could date back decades. The implication was disturbing. This hidden canyon had been known to some people, but had somehow remained off official maps and outside official knowledge. Thompson made another discovery that added to the mystery. About 100 yards from the Bronco, partially concealed by desert vegetation, he found what appeared to be the remains of a campsite. Canvas fragments, rusted metal tent stakes, and other camping debris suggested that someone had spent considerable time in this location. The debris was too old and weathered to definitively connect to the Henderson family, but the timing seemed consistent. If the family had indeed reached this canyon in July 1993, they might have attempted to camp here before continuing deeper into the formation. Rodriguez's electromagnetic equipment detected one more anomaly that night. Deeper in the canyon, approximately 2 miles from where they had found the Bronco, the instruments registered a stronger metallic signature. Something large and metallic was located further into the canyon system, but the approaching darkness and the dangerous terrain made immediate investigation impossible. As the research team prepared to leave the canyon and report their discovery, Rodriguez took one final set of electromagnetic readings. What she found was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire discovery. According to her instruments, the electromagnetic signature that had originally led them to this location was no longer present. The anomaly that had appeared on satellite data for the past several months had vanished, as if whatever had been causing the electromagnetic disturbance had somehow completed its purpose once the canyon and its secrets had been discovered. The journey out of the canyon took place in darkness, with the research team using headlights and GPS to navigate the treacherous trail. As they reached the rim and looked back into the hidden depths, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were leaving behind more mysteries than they had solved. On July 21, 2023, Rodriguez contacted the New Mexico State Police to report the discovery of the Henderson family's vehicle. Within hours, the quiet desert canyon would be transformed into a major crime scene investigation, with federal agents, anthropologists, and search teams converging on a location that officially didn't exist. The discovery of the Henderson family's Bronco in an unmapped canyon 30 years after their disappearance would reopen one of the Southwest's most enduring mysteries. But it would also create new questions that challenged everything investigators thought they knew about the case. How had a family driving on a desert highway in 1993 ended up in a canyon that didn't appear on any map? Why had the most extensive search in New Mexico history failed to find a location that was only 40 miles from where they were last seen? And most importantly, where were David, Sarah, Michael, and Emma Henderson? The answers to these questions lay deeper in the canyon, in places where the rock formation seemed to defy geological explanation and where the very nature of reality appeared to operate by different rules than the outside world. The desert had finally begun to reveal its secrets, but those secrets would prove to be far stranger and more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The federal response to the discovery of the Henderson family's vehicle was swift and comprehensive. Within 48 hours of Dr. Rodriguez's report, the remote canyon had been transformed into one of the most unusual crime scenes in FBI history. Special Agent Diana Foster, a 20-year veteran specializing in cold cases and unexplained disappearances, found herself leading an investigation that would challenge everything she thought she knew about missing persons cases. Agent Foster's first priority was establishing the chain of custody and ensuring that the scene remained uncontaminated. But as federal agents, forensic specialists, and search teams descended into the hidden canyon, it became clear that this case would defy conventional investigative procedures from the very beginning. The canyon's absence from all official maps created immediate logistical challenges. GPS coordinates led to the location reliably, but satellite imagery showed only empty desert. Military reconnaissance photos dating back to the 1950s showed no trace of the canyon formation. Even Native American tribal maps, some dating back over a century, made no reference to the canyon's existence. Dr. Patricia Whitehorse, a Navajo Nation archaeologist and cultural liaison, was brought in to provide historical context. Her reaction to the canyon was immediate and unsettling. "This place," she said, standing at the canyon's rim and looking down into its depths, "should not exist. Our people have traveled this area for over 1,000 years. We have stories about every rock formation, every water source, every place where the earth opens up. But this place is not in any of our stories." The initial forensic examination of the Henderson family's Bronco yielded results that defied explanation. Despite having been exposed to 30 years of desert weather, the vehicle was in remarkably good condition. The paint showed minimal fading. The rubber components remained flexible, and even paper documents inside the vehicle were only lightly yellowed with age. Dr. Marcus Chen, the FBI's chief forensic scientist, had never encountered anything like it in his 25-year career. "It's as if time has moved differently here," he reported to Agent Foster. "The degradation patterns we're seeing are consistent with maybe 5 years of exposure, not 30. Even more puzzling were the environmental factors. The canyon's microclimate appeared to be significantly different from the surrounding desert. Temperature readings showed variations that couldn't be explained by elevation or orientation. Humidity levels were higher than they should be in such an arid environment. Most disturbing of all, magnetic compass readings were wildly inconsistent throughout the canyon, making navigation difficult even with modern GPS equipment. The search for the Henderson family themselves began with following the footprint trail that Dr. Rodriguez's team had discovered. The prints, while old and partially obscured, provided a clear path deeper into the canyon system. What the search teams found as they followed this trail would redefine their understanding of the case entirely. Approximately 1 mile from the Bronco, the search team discovered the remains of what appeared to be a sophisticated campsite. Unlike the debris that Rodriguez's team had found earlier, this site showed evidence of long-term habitation. Multiple fire rings, constructed windbreaks, and even rudimentary furniture suggested that someone had lived in this location for an extended period. Among the artifacts recovered from the campsite were items that could definitively be linked to the Henderson family. Sarah Henderson's distinctive turquoise bracelet, which had been mentioned in missing person reports, was found near one of the fire rings. Michael Henderson's comic book collection, described by his friends as his most prized possession, was discovered wrapped in plastic and stored in a natural cave formation. But most significant was the discovery of David Henderson's geological journal, expanded far beyond the brief entries that had been found in the Bronco. The journal's later entries, written on pages that David had apparently improvised from bark and other natural materials, told a story that challenged rational explanation. The journal entries, dated sporadically over a period that appeared to span several months, described the family's gradual adaptation to life in the canyon. David wrote about water sources that appeared and disappeared according to no predictable pattern. He documented plant life that didn't match any known species in the region. Most disturbingly, he described temporal anomalies that made it difficult to track the passage of time. "Day 47, I think," read one entry. "Sarah's watch stopped working 3 weeks ago, and my watch shows times that don't match the sun's position. We've started marking days by scratching marks on a rock wall, but sometimes we disagree about how many marks there should be. Michael insists that we've been here for 2 months, but Emma is convinced it's been less than 3 weeks. Another entry, dated several pages later, described encounters with other people in the canyon. "We are not alone here. Yesterday we met a family who says they've been in the canyon since 1987. They were driving from Phoenix to Denver when they took a wrong turn and ended up here. Like us, they found that the way they came in no longer exists when they try to leave." The journal described a small community of people who had found their way into the canyon over the decades, all reporting similar experiences of becoming lost in time and space. David wrote about a former military pilot who claimed to have crashed here in 1962, an elderly couple who said they had been hiking in the area in 1995, and a family of 4 who had arrived just weeks before the Hendersons. As the FBI search teams ventured deeper into the canyon, they began to discover evidence supporting David's journal entries. Multiple campsites, some clearly decades old, were scattered throughout the canyon system. Personal artifacts dating from different time periods were found. A military dog tag from 1962, car keys for a 1995 Honda Civic, camping gear that appeared to be from the 1980s. The most disturbing discovery came when the search teams reached the electromagnetic anomaly that Dr. Rodriguez had detected deeper in the canyon. In a circular clearing surrounded by impossibly twisted rock formations, they found what could only be described as a graveyard. Dozens of graves, marked with improvised headstones made from flat rocks, were arranged in rough rows across the clearing. The inscriptions on the stones told a story of people from different decades who had found their way into the canyon and never left. Names, dates, and brief epitaphs carved into the rock revealed the canyon's dark secret. James Mitchell, U.S. Air Force, 1962-2018, lost in time but found peace. Maria and Carlos Gonzalez, 1995-2019, together forever in a place that time forgot. The Henderson family, 1993-2021, beloved parents and children who chose love over fear. Agent Foster stood in the graveyard, reading the inscriptions and trying to process their implications. If the dates were accurate, people had been trapped in this canyon for decades, aging and dying in a place that seemed to exist outside normal time and space. The graves appeared to be recent, despite some bearing dates from decades past. The rock inscriptions were clear and deep, showing little sign of weathering. Even more puzzling, the bodies buried beneath the markers showed minimal decomposition, as if the canyon's temporal anomalies affected even death itself. Dr. Sandra Blackwood, a forensic anthropologist brought in to examine the remains, made discoveries that challenged everything she knew about human decomposition. "These bodies," she reported to Agent Foster, "should be completely skeletal after years of burial in desert conditions. Instead, they're showing preservation patterns that are completely unprecedented. It's as if the normal processes of decay have been dramatically slowed." The examination of the Henderson family graves revealed that all 4 family members had died within a few years of each other, sometime between 2018 and 2021. According to the grave markers, David had died first, followed by Sarah, then Michael, and finally Emma. The causes of death, based on the limited forensic evidence available, appeared to be natural, the result of aging and illness rather than violence or accident. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As the search teams explored the farthest reaches of the canyon system, they encountered people who were still alive. In a sheltered area near a natural spring, the search teams found a small community of survivors. 12 people, ranging in age from children to elderly adults, had created a modest settlement in the hidden depths of the canyon. They lived in improvised shelters, subsisted on wild plants and small game, and had developed their own social structure for survival. The community was led by a woman who introduced herself as Margaret Sullivan. According to her story, she had been a 35-year-old nurse from Phoenix when she and her family had taken a wrong turn while camping in 1987. Now appearing to be in her early 50s, despite claiming to have been in the canyon for over 30 years, Margaret had become the unofficial leader of the small group of temporal refugees. "Time doesn't work the same way here," Margaret explained to the stunned federal agents. "We age, but slowly. Wounds heal faster than they should. Diseases that should kill us seem to fade away. We've learned to accept that we're living by different rules now. Among the survivors was a man who claimed to be Michael Henderson, now appearing to be in his 30s, despite having entered the canyon as a 16-year-old. Michael had spent most of his adult life in the temporal prison of the Hidden Canyon. His sister Emma had died just 2 years earlier, he explained, succumbing to an illness that in the outside world would have been easily treatable. Michael's account of life in the canyon filled in the gaps left by his father's journal. The family had initially tried repeatedly to find their way out, but every path they followed seemed to lead deeper into the maze-like formation. The desert above the canyon appeared to shift and change, making it impossible to retrace their steps to the entrance they had originally used. "We would climb to the rim," Michael explained, "and the landscape above would be completely different from what we remembered. Roads that had been there the day before would be gone. Hills that we had used as landmarks would have moved. It was as if the outside world was rearranging itself to keep us trapped." The community had learned to survive by pooling their knowledge and resources. The former military pilot, Captain James Mitchell, had provided survival training. A family of hikers from the 1990s had contributed knowledge about edible plants and water sources. The Hendersons had brought geological expertise that helped the group find the safest areas for permanent settlement. Over the decades, the community had developed its own culture and traditions. Children born in the canyon grew up with stories of the outside world, but had never experienced life beyond the canyon walls. Adults maintained hope of eventual rescue while accepting the reality that they might never leave. The most disturbing aspect of their situation was the gradual loss of connection to their previous lives. Michael Henderson no longer remembered his high school friends clearly. Details about his life in Colorado had faded like dreams upon waking. The canyon seemed to gradually erase memories of the outside world, helping its prisoners adapt to their eternal imprisonment. Agent Foster faced an unprecedented situation. She had discovered the answer to one of the Southwest's most famous missing persons cases, but the answer raised questions that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. How could a large geological formation exist without appearing on any map? How could time move differently in one location? And most importantly, how could she evacuate survivors from a place that seemed to exist outside normal space and time? The evacuation efforts began immediately, but they proved to be extraordinarily difficult. The canyon's shifting nature made it nearly impossible to establish reliable routes in and out. Helicopter rescue attempts failed when aircraft instruments malfunctioned within the canyon's boundaries. Ground evacuation required extensive rope systems and took days to accomplish for each person. Even more challenging was the effect that leaving the canyon had on its long-term residents. As survivors were brought to the surface, they experienced severe disorientation and physical distress. The sudden return to normal time flow seemed to accelerate their aging, and several of the elderly community members died within hours of reaching the outside world. Michael Henderson survived the evacuation, but the transition was traumatic. Suddenly, thrust into a world that had moved 30 years beyond his memory, he struggled to understand changes in technology, culture, and society. The family he had lost in the canyon could never be replaced, and the life he might have lived had been stolen by the temporal anomaly that had trapped him. Dr. Rodriguez's scientific team, working in collaboration with federal investigators, attempted to understand the canyon's properties. Their research revealed electromagnetic anomalies consistent with theories about temporal distortion, but the underlying cause remained mysterious. Some scientists theorized about natural dimensional rifts, while others suggested undiscovered mineral deposits with exotic properties. The official explanation for the Henderson family case was carefully crafted to avoid public panic while acknowledging the basic facts. The family had become lost in a previously unknown canyon system where survival had been possible for an extended period. 3 family members had died of natural causes over the years, while one survivor had been successfully rescued. The canyon itself was classified as a restricted area under federal jurisdiction. Official maps were updated to show the geological formation, but access was limited to authorized scientific research. The temporal anomalies were downplayed in public reports, described as unusual electromagnetic conditions that could affect sensitive equipment. Michael Henderson, now technically in his 40s but psychologically still a teenager from 1993, faced the challenge of building a new life in a world he no longer recognized. Government support helped him obtain identification, education, and psychological counseling, but the trauma of losing 30 years and his entire family in an impossible place would never fully heal. The other survivors from the canyon community faced similar challenges. Some adapted better than others to life in the modern world, but all carried the psychological scars of their temporal imprisonment. Support groups were established to help them process their experiences, but the unique nature of their trauma made conventional therapy largely ineffective. Agent Foster's final report on the Henderson family case became one of the most classified documents in FBI history. The full truth about the canyon's temporal properties was deemed too sensitive for public release, but the basic facts of the family's fate were shared with their surviving relatives and friends. David Henderson's elderly parents, now in their 90s, were able to finally learn the truth about their son's fate and meet their surviving grandson. The reunion was bittersweet. Joy at finding Michael alive, combined with grief for the 3 family members who had died in the hidden canyon and the 30 years of life that had been lost. Sarah Henderson's sister, Linda, who had spent 30 years advocating for missing persons cases, found closure in finally knowing what had happened to her sister's family. But the knowledge also brought new questions about how many other missing persons cases might involve similar unexplained phenomena. The gas station attendant Miguel Ramirez, now in his 70s, was relieved to learn that his directions hadn't directly caused the family's death. But he also carried the burden of knowing that his simple act of kindness in drawing a map had led the Hendersons into 30 years of temporal imprisonment. Dr. Rodriguez continued her research into the canyon's anomalies, but with strict oversight from federal authorities. Her work contributed to a growing body of classified research into locations around the world where the normal laws of physics seemed to operate differently. The canyon itself remained under constant monitoring, but it continued to defy complete understanding. Occasional electromagnetic anomalies suggested that its temporal properties were still active, but no other missing persons cases were definitively linked to the location. As for the broader implications of the Henderson family discovery, the case became a closely guarded secret within certain government and scientific circles. The existence of places where time could move differently raised questions about the nature of reality itself, questions that most people were not prepared to contemplate. The truth about what happened to the Henderson family, that they had spent 30 years trapped in a temporal anomaly hidden in an unmapped canyon, was stranger than any conspiracy theory that had emerged during the decades they were missing. But it was also more tragic because it represented the loss of an entire family to forces beyond human understanding or control. Michael Henderson, the sole survivor of his family's impossible journey, became a living reminder that there are still mysteries in the world that science cannot fully explain. His story stands as a testament to human resilience and adaptability, but also as a warning about the dangers that might be hidden in the vast and unexplored spaces of our world. The desert had finally revealed its greatest secret, but that revelation only opened the door to greater mysteries. In a universe where time and space could be twisted by unknown forces, the Henderson family's fate served as a reminder that some places are too dangerous for human exploration, and some truths are too strange for most people to accept. The case file on the Henderson family disappearance was officially closed on December 15, 2023, but the questions it raised about the nature of reality itself remain open to this day.